Hey, and welcome back to Flow Show. I'm Joanna Turner, Intuitive Business Mentor, and today we're going to be talking about spooky season and shadow work. I know, nobody wants to talk about that stuff, but it's important, and we are in the perfect time in history and this year to talk about this stuff. So, I'm a Scorpio. My birthday's on Wednesday, and hopefully I'll have this episode up by then. And I wish you happy Halloween. So we could get into some of the stuff about Halloween. Personally, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan. Now, don't get me wrong. I actually really love dressing up, and I have put great effort into some of my costumes over the years. But I'm not mad about the scary costumes. There's something, especially when people have masks on. So I don't like particularly being scared, or I remember I used to always go out for my birthday, was always Halloween, and we'd go out. But I hated when guys would have scary, I don't know, masks and things on, and I couldn't tell who was who, like in a nightclub and it's dark and it's loud and then you can't see their face. I really didn't like that. So really what shadow work is, we're going to get into it in more detail, but it's about taking your mask off, right? So I've never liked the masks, and essentially we get to take the mask off. We might not be wearing a scary mask. Maybe the mask you're wearing is the good girl, the super nice person, the I'm not triggered person, whatever that is, right? We're going to get into it. But why is now a really fabulous time to work on this stuff? Well, you probably know Halloween, All Saints Eve. It is the time to work with your ancestors. The veil is thin, and more spooky things happen at this time of year. So there is an opportunity for that kind of work. Sometimes our shadow does come from our ancestral side, things that have been handed down from your childhood, that kind of thing. So it could be a really great time to work with that stuff anyway. And then on top of that, we are in a bigger cycle that is a time of really deep transformation and closure. So we have had the planet of Pluto. Again, I'm not an astrologer, but I am very fascinated by this stuff and I do my research. But and when it's these sort of bigger cycles, I think it really helps explain what's going on in our own lives and in the collective. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm fascinated by. And I love seeing when the timelines line up, and that when the astrology really comes to life and there is almost no denying what is happening in the world. And obviously the astrology keeps being backed up and backed up. If you ask me, I absolutely believe in it 100%. I can see it in my own life. Sometimes to the day, I'm like, wow, I wonder what happened in my chart that day. So I really do enjoy it. So we have been in this 16-year cycle. So if you have been going through it for the last 16 years or felt like you've had a lot of transformation going on, then I feel for you. So have I. I would say that's mostly the length of time my full awakening-ish has been going on. 16 years. I had my first healing probably 14 years ago, but I had started to wake up and work on my health and some underlying stuff probably 16 years ago. So give or take. So it's been a long time, and I would like to say goodbye to this chapter of massive awakening and transformation. It's not all been bad, don't get me wrong, but it is not easy to do this stuff, and it's not fun to do this stuff necessarily, although it can get more fun as you work through it. And transformation can come through joy as well. It doesn't always have to be hard and difficult and awful. And I think that's what puts people off. But sometimes we are wired to think the only way we can transform initially is through pain. And really, I feel like sometimes almost a more evolved version is doing it through joy. And sometimes it can come down to, honestly, how much happiness, joy can you let in? Sometimes we don't allow it to come into our lives. So that might even be a shadow for you. But anyway, this 16-year cycle, Thank goodness it's coming to an end. So we've had Pluto, which is I have a lot of Pluto in my chart as well, is the planet of transformation, death, and rebirth, a bit like the Scorpio. And it has been in the sign of Capricorn for 16 years. And Capricorn, the sign itself, represents structure, authority, long-term goals, that kind of thing. So when you've got a planet that represents structure with Pluto, or Pluto going through Capricorn, it's going to start slowly breaking down societal and personal structures that no longer serve us. So I think had you said this to me back in 2008, I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have quite understood what I was even trying to say. I remember my astrologer slash shaman lady talking to us about this probably 2018, sitting in different circles and things. And I was like, yeah, okay. She's like, the government structures will break down, the university structures, your healthcare system, the money system. And when you're sitting in 2008 or 2018, even 6 years ago, you can hear these things, but they don't necessarily ring. You can't really quite comprehend what that would look like when you're sitting in this sort of very safe world that feels like it's been operating like it has for a long time. So for me, yeah, I knew it was coming, but I couldn't have ever I didn't really feel like it would actually happen because so much would have to change. So I think obviously the pandemic accelerated a lot of that happening, and it woke a lot of people up to what was going on with the old structures and how they don't work and how they're not really geared in our favor or really truly supporting us. So we're starting to see this, and I was like, how would the education system crumble? For instance, we're seeing more homeschoolers, we're seeing people getting degrees online and not going into universities, you're seeing different things close, people are no longer putting a university degree on a pedestal like they used to. So there has been a lot of change. Younger people aren't necessarily wanting to go. I mean, we're very lucky in Scotland. Our university education is free, but I do know in the US, obviously, it can cost you tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, to get yourself a higher education. And unless you're literally going to be a doctor or an engineer or something that really does require a degree, people aren't so keen to get an arts degree or an English degree or a history degree if it's not going to really pay off in the long run. So we're definitely seeing a big shift in mindset patterns around that. It's in the UK, the health system, for instance, I'm sure you can see it yourself. We were told it's overwhelmed, then they're really empty. But here in the UK, it's the same narrative every single year. Oh, we're not prepared for flu season, all this kind of stuff. We're so overrun, and you can't get a doctor's appointment. It's almost impossible to get an ambulance quickly. So for me, I don't see that as my primary healthcare. I want to take care of that personally myself to the greatest degree that I can, and if I never stepped in another hospital again, I wouldn't be upset. So that's me and my goal. But I think a lot of people are waking up to that. They're less likely to just go and take a pill to solve the problem. They're looking for the root cause. They want true health. They want to figure things out at a deeper level. So you can start to see things shifting and changing, and less reliance on those kind of systems happening. And that's maybe something we would not have thought possible 16 years ago. So that's the kind of thing that we can see in our societal structures breaking down. And then you've got your personal ones. So that is your old patterns, your beliefs, your conditioning. What have we been taught to believe about those societal structures, your government, your healthcare, all those kind of things? People are just like, wait a second, I don't need to believe that anymore. So we've got that going on personally. And then we've got our deeper inner beliefs and patterns. Are these beliefs and patterns serving me? What is really true here? What have I been taught to believe? What what would serve me better to believe. And it's really allowing us this phase in our lives. It's not going to stop, on the 19th of November, but it's really encouraging a sort of last push to clean house, to confront these shadowy aspects that we've maybe been continuing to suppress and push down. And ultimately, they will come out, right? The things that we push down and suppress, often I've used this example before. We talked about it when I had Ryan on. And it's from one of the queens of shadow work herself, Debbie Ford. The book is called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, I think. And she uses the example of trying to hold a beach ball underneath the water in a swimming pool. If you've never tried to do that, I mean, I'm sure most of us have, but you sort of wobble around on top of this beach ball, and eventually once you can't hold on to it anymore and you can't keep the pressure on it, repressing it, suppressing it, pushing it down, it comes up and it smacks you in the face, and you get a surprise and a face full of water. So the idea with shadow work is kind of that we take the air out of the balloon, and then it can't come up and smack you in the face when you're least expecting it. So it can show up when we're repressing it, pushing things down. It can show up in ill health, disease, that kind of thing. Explosion, like when you're faced with a situation and you have a massive overreaction to it, you're triggered by something that really the situation was not the thing that was really going on. It was the deeper suppressed shadow hidden parts that you haven't looked at. And so this thing is causing a much bigger reaction in the present moment than it maybe needs to. And if you are being constantly triggered, upset, things like that, there's something to look at. If you're feeling stuck in life, if you've got some self-sabotaging behaviors going on, then again, you've very likely got some shadow working on. And I'll give a wee bit later on, I'll give a few specific examples about what that might look like. If you have got an online business, perhaps you're in the coaching business like I am, the healing space, these things will show up in different ways within your work, within clients, and it's not ideal. So, but this is also relevant for anybody, right? It is not just people that have online businesses. Absolutely anybody, and all of us really have this stuff. And if you think you don't, then you probably do. That's why it's called a shadow. So specifically, this stuff is where it's the pieces that we can't see necessarily or identify. You might have started to be like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that. But sometimes you are just totally oblivious to this. You just cannot see it. You'd be like, wait, what? I just would never have guessed. So I definitely had some moments like that when I was first starting out on my journey. I had zero awareness that anything I was doing was the cause, or I was pushing people away when I was dating, or I wasn't open. I had no idea. I had no idea that I had suppressed emotions that were causing my weight to fluctuate, my relationships, my job situation. I had no idea that I had so much unprocessed stuff going on, and really starting my online business kind of took the lid off that and showed me a whole bunch of places that I didn't have any idea I had things going on. So very grateful for that. Sometimes starting your own business is the fastest way into spiritual development, because you really are faced with a whole bunch of new things that you never would have imagined that you would have had. So hats off to this online space for accelerating our spiritual growth. Yeah. So, like I said, this 16 years, we've been breaking down the old systems personally, society, within society. And it's not, like you've probably noticed, it's not always been pleasant, the outcome of that. But it may be a good time, as we come towards the end of this, to have some time to reflect, check in. How is this working for me? Is this something I want to carry on? Where are we going with this? So yeah, it's definitely a good time to be taking that little bit of time out to get maybe some more clarity or a perspective. So yeah, So what's happening? So with this Pluto in Capricorn has had a few moments of going in and out of Aquarius, which is where it's headed. And it's going into Aquarius for nearly 20 years on the 19th of November. So that is an exciting move. And the move into Aquarius stands for innovation and collective power. So there's definitely a shift in the energy of having been controlled by the old systems into a new way of doing things. We've had some glimpses, we've had some cool things, innovations and things popping up, but that's really going to ramp up in the next 20 years, and we'll probably have quite a different world in 20 years time. Like, it just won't be the same. So that is quite exciting, but also change can be scary when things are not the same. But ultimately, I like to always come back to the positive and know that even if there is going to be some turmoil as these old structures try and cling on to power on their way out, a golden time is coming, a golden age is coming. I think it's going to be beautiful, especially when we focus more on the collaboration side of things, connection, supporting each other more innovative ways of doing things. I think ultimately it's going to be positive. So definitely hold on to that when, over the next couple of years, because it is going to get a little rocky, a little wild. But yeah, let's hold on to that. So we are moving into Pluto being in Aquarius, which is exciting. And I think that the more that we can hold on to the positive side of this, hold a nice positive intention and outcome, we can also impact that on a global scale. Your energy matters, your contribution in that sense matters. And I think the more that we can find, I've spoken about it before, finding our center within the chaos and whatever comes, and knowing yourself and knowing that is firm and true and not going anywhere, I think will go a long way in the coming months and years as the transformation happens. So it's going to be interesting, going to be very interesting. And I think if we can focus on it being interesting rather than awful or intense, I think we're going to set ourselves up a lot better. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? So we can build, and that finding that center within yourself, the eye of the storm, we build and restructure our internal world so we have a solid foundation internally, and then that will reflect externally as well. So that's what we want to be looking at. So let's have a think. So shadow work, it's the darker aspects. It's usually fear, shame, guilt, usually trauma. Sometimes it can be, like I said, it could be from your childhood, it can be ancestral, it might be past lives. That's all the kind of things that come up with my clients when we work through this kind of thing. And we often don't know what that core shadow is until we really take the time to see it. And often when you're doing it yourself, you might journal on these things, you might meditate on these things. But sometimes it does take working with somebody else to shine a light and mirror back the parts that you can't see. Some of my biggest moments of transformation have definitely come working with somebody who's asked that question that I couldn't ask myself, or I wouldn't have been able to see myself. And it can be very powerful. So I'm going to share way towards the end of this that I have a little special offer going on for this period if you are looking to work through some of this stuff. So we really want to, and it does take a little bit of courage. It takes some determination sometimes. It's not always, it's much easier to just try and keep suppressing it, but it will come and smack you in the face at some point, and I'd rather it didn't, right? Let's take the air out of this beach ball. So, okay, let's see what's next. So it's time, I think, we can start to focus on having this healthier, more aligned future, right? More aligned, built on this solid, authentic foundation, where we really have more, I suppose, more control in our lives, or more control of ourselves, to be able to make decisions that feel really aligned and without the same internal dialogue or patterns or blocks that feel like they've been holding us back. So it'll be a fun time. So let's see. So shadow work, like I've said, we're facing these parts that we don't want to see. Carl Jung introduced this concept of shadow work as part of our unconscious mind. So he believed that true healing and self-understanding came when we confronted the dark or hidden aspects. And I think that's true. It's not about being bad or wrong. It's more about embracing the whole part of us. I think it was maybe Debbie Ford again, her book, I think did she say she was doing a live event and she called some woman a bitch and the woman was shocked and eventually she was like, yeah, actually I am a bitch. And I think when we can own some of these parts of ourselves instead of being like, oh no, I'm definitely not this and I'm not that. And I think being able to claim some of these parts of ourselves can be a powerful start to freeing ourselves from this stuff. So there are lots of different ways you can obviously start this work. You don't have to work with somebody ever. You can always start working on this stuff yourself. After all, nobody else can heal you. If you are working with somebody, they are holding space, hopefully a loving space, and a place where you can ultimately come to some conclusions and heal yourself ultimately. But having that support can obviously help things and move them forward more quickly. But if you are starting out on this journey, you can obviously journal on some of this stuff. Mirror work is powerful. I find it quite confronting doing mirror work, I have to say. And so also what I found myself is because I would find some of these things confronting, if I was just left to my own devices, honestly, I just might not have faced some stuff. But I found to help with my own accountability that working with people, booking in sessions, things like that really helped me not avoid the work, and it let me be more accountable to myself. So I knew myself enough to know that I would probably come up with 10 excuses. Like I can come up with 10 excuses why I shouldn't go to the gym. I did go last night though, I was very proud of myself. But I can come up with 10 excuses not to do the journaling, not to do the mirror work, not to do a meditation. But when I book in a session and show up and I've paid for it, I will sit there and do the work. I think that's why also I have had quite a journey with different plant medicines and ethnogens and things like that, because I couldn't avoid the work. They helped sit my ass down and work through the stuff, regardless of whether I wanted to or not, kind of thing. So you've got to find what works for you. If you can do it on your own, perfect. Amazing. Well done. If you need to book into something, amazing. Well done. Either way, it doesn't matter. As long as you're not living with this stuff, you're not living in a constant state of stress or anxiety, or you've got tons of insecurities that are showing up and messing up your life. As long as you're not living like that and you know there is an alternative, then perfect. That's cool. So yeah, we're really about embracing our wholeness. And I think sometimes as well, we cannot be authentic when we're trying to hide the bits of us that we think other people won't like. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in the first few months of a relationship and you're really, what was it? I can't remember who said this, but they said the first 3 months of your relationship, you're sending your best advocate for your future self. So you're pretending you're like the nicest person in the world or whatever it is. Most people can only keep up the facade for about 3 months, and then the real you starts to creep out. And so wouldn't it be nice if you could just show up in a relationship from the beginning being your true authentic self, and they don't need to meet some monster in 3 months? So I think and it can be the same in friendships, in, oh my gosh, in families. You know, we can be pretending to be something and then behind closed doors we're something completely different. I don't want that. I don't want to be that person. I think one of the nicest things some of my team said at one of my events was, I'm the same behind the scenes as I am on stage, and that meant a lot to me. You're not getting one version when the cameras and the microphones are on, and a different version in the team meeting. You know, I don't want to be that. It's also exhausting, by the way, trying to constantly be something else and hide the parts that you think are kind of yucky or gross is totally exhausting. And the random thing is, the more work I've done with this, sat in so many circles, retreats, and all this kind of stuff, once you get that thing, the ugly gremlin that you're trying to hide, once you get it out and you show it, and you're still loved and accepted afterwards, the freedom that comes with that is unbelievable. So it could be that the deepest, darkest part of you that you are hiding and suppressing is actually your ticket to freedom. Is quite amazing when you stop trying to hide it and you just go, yeah, sometimes I can be a bitch, or I am judgmental, or I don't know. You can choose whatever that thing is for you. That's okay, right? But the more that we can own it and not try and suppress it and be seen for all of us, because also if you're just putting this perfect version of yourself forward and not exposing all of it, you don't really trust when somebody loves you. You're like, but you only love this nice, perfect version of me that I'm showing you. You don't know all of it, right? So really, it can be a way of, again, avoiding pushing away people by not showing them your true self. And ironically, once that part has been shown, it actually, people like you, tend to like you more. Let's just be honest. They tend to like you more. So I remember in one retreat thing I was on for, well, it was a two week long things, and I did them back to back. And I had been really small and hiding, and it was the second week, so it had taken me like 10 days to get to this point of being fed up and I thought I didn't want to be seen, and I was really hiding, keeping myself small, very self-conscious. And I got in the middle of the circle, and it was the most uncomfortable thing I think I've ever done. And I was shaking. I mean, I just did not want to be there. I was like, God, if I could just be anywhere else in the whole world, that would be nice. Instead of with 30 people looking at me in the middle of a circle. Like, that is my actual worst nightmare. But what ultimately came from that, this deep hiding and suppressing and being small, what was actually came out in that circle was me wanting to be seen in my full power. I had been suppressing my power and hiding myself because I didn't want to be seen. And so in this circle, I ended up roaring. I let it all out and claimed my full power. And I'd felt so vulnerable, so awkward, all the things. And at the end of it, though, afterwards, people came up to me and they acknowledged me and they congratulated me for getting over myself. And it was like people that I would have considered quite powerful there hadn't been able to see me before. Like, I had been obviously hiding, but they hadn't seen me. And once I sort of opened this thing up, let out all the fear and the vulnerability and acknowledge this power that was actually been building up and this actual real desire to be seen in my full power, they could see me. And I was connecting with different people. My whole vibration and like aura had shifted, and the rest of my experience was completely different. But it took me, it took me to a difficult place I didn't want to be to get to the other side of that. And if you had told me, oh, you actually just want to be seen fully in your full power, I'd have been like, yeah, right. No, I'm quite happy hiding in the corner, not being seen. I'll just stay over here and avoid anyone looking at me. I will avoid the judgment that way. I won't be seen. I won't be, all the things. So I don't know what you're hiding. I don't know what the thing is that you don't want to be seen, but it's powerful and rewarding to shine a light on these things. Okay, so some ways that this can show up in the context of an online business, or if you're coaching or have some sort of service-based business. And honestly, these also will apply to most other places in life. It could be your workplace. I don't know. Let me know. Tell me if anything comes up for you. Okay. So definitely imposter syndrome and self-doubt. I mean, number one, let's call it. I think most people I found out feel some level of imposter syndrome, even people running big companies. I was just, even as an accountant who was highly qualified, highly trained, chartered accountant, specialized in insurance, I was constantly waiting to be found out for being a massive fraud, even though I had all my exams and certifications and everything else to back me up. I was just waiting to be found out. And I think that was how I sort of felt, even with all of the certifications and all the rest of it. So when I started coaching, I kind of felt the same way. I was like, I don't know if I'm a coach yet. And so there was definitely an element of playing the role before it actually felt like I genuinely was. And I'm not somebody who would have ever considered myself to want to have an online. I'd never posted a selfie online before I started my business. I had never had photo shoots and all that kind of stuff. It just wasn't me. I wasn't like, I want to be famous and I want to be, just wasn't in my wheelhouse at all. And so that kind of stuff definitely showed up for me. Hated, and you don't really know when you're changing into a new business, you don't really know how good you are. And you do kind of rely on some of your first few clients' results to tell you, am I any good at this? So it's a real tricky kind of, you get caught a little bit up in that, but you kind of need to, at the beginning, to find out if you're any good. You don't want to assume you're good and people aren't they aren't having a transformation. That would be weird. So you do kind of have to base some of your ideas on your clients' results at the beginning to figure out if you're any good at this or not, right? But then later on, you have to detach yourself from that, because there are some people you can coach until you're blue in the face and they will be just determined to stay exactly as they are. And there are other people that you can give the same love and care and attention and level of coaching or healing or whatever, and they will have a massive transformation. And so there's definitely a way of having to extract yourself from their results, but it's very difficult at the beginning to do that when you're just starting out. So yeah, there's a little bit with that, but I think finally owning who you are. And I felt like once I'd become confident as a coach, and then my spiritual side started coming out, and I would look at these people who were calling themselves priestesses and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, wow, who told them to call themselves that, right? I just didn't have, I felt weird claiming any kind of spiritual abilities or anything like that. And I was like, wow, look at these people. And I realized they'd just given themselves the permission to do it and call themselves a priestess or whatever they wanted. And there was really nothing, I've never actually called myself or referred myself to that still, and I don't want to, but I was like, wow, they just claimed that for themselves and chose that for themselves. And at a certain level, again, we just have to own it and claim it. So there might be something hiding in there for you. Then we've got perfectionism and control. Now, this is a bit insidious and it can really slow you down in your business. I had a call with somebody just the other day, lovely girl, and she's like, I'm wanting to start my podcast, but she is wanting it to be perfect. She's asking great questions, but wanting it to be completely optimized and this and that and I was like, you just need to start. right? I've tried so many times to start. I bought all the expensive equipment and all these different things and, made up all these stories. And I just should have just started, right? So perfectionism can really get in the way of getting started. She's like, oh, give me a couple of months. I'm like, you could just start it tomorrow, right? Like you don't need a couple of months for it to be perfect, right? When's the best time to start? Yesterday. Second best time now. So so perfectionism can really show up. Maybe you're spending weeks or months perfecting your website or your offers or something else. I had a client who just loved to get caught up in the planning of things, but sometimes execution she was a bit slower in, but she wanted the plan to be perfect and all that kind of stuff. So, and then control shows up when we don't want to let go of any of the parts of it. We don't want to take on an assistant or get a graphic designer or whatever that looks like. We're trying to control absolutely everything in the business, and that can really keep us small and stop us building and scaling, and it can delay your launch and you can become burnt out and really a whole lot of other things. So yeah, and also it can stop you really engaging authentically with your clients and your audience, because you're trying to show up with this absolutely perfect polished image, like you've got everything under control. And really the truth of it is none of us do. Right? Very, very clearly none of us do. So that's a big one. The next one can show up maybe as fear of rejection or criticism. So you might avoid saying certain things online. You might avoid certain marketing strategies. You might not want to go on video. I definitely had that. A real fear of being judged, or maybe this definitely has been me in the past as well, being hyper aware of negative feedback. And all that can just absolutely paralyze your decision making and allowing you to move forward. So maybe there's a little bit of that going on for you. I could have, 300 lovely reviews and one person said something slightly off, and that could really throw me in the past. And now I'm much better at asking for feedback, taking feedback, being open to it, all of that good stuff. It's so much easier, and I don't take it personally. I actively ask for feedback. So that can be really important as well. Yeah, just be aware of that. So you might be over vanillaing yourself. I had a client once who I was trying to pull out something from her in a retreat, and she was giving me, just the blandest. She was kind of like, I was like, what are you passionate about? What are you excited about? And she's like, I don't know, cats or something. And I was just looking at her and I'm like, you're so much cooler than that. Like, you have so much more going on. Like, let's get to the bottom of this, right? I was like, no, it's not about, I don't know. I don't know if it was cat. There was something just like really like, wah, wah. And not that cats are boring, but as for her and who she was and what she was passionate about, and her brand evolved into like sacred sexuality and tantra stuff. And I was like, yes, this is what we want. This is what I was trying to get at. It wasn't about cats or whatever the heck it was about. I was like, this is truly what it's all about. And she had to own that within herself and really stop avoiding it because she didn't want to be criticized or judged or whatever. All right. So number 4, I think I have 10. So number 4 is money blocks, money mindset blocks. So you might have a reluctance to charge. You might feel guilty about earning. You might feel unworthy of your success. All of this kind of stuff comes from a lot of deep-rooted beliefs around money, self-worth, that kind of thing. Maybe you believe you have to work really hard to make money. You might have witnessed your parents working super long hours or having multiple jobs, and it's just absolutely ingrained in you. Who are you to earn more than them and work less? Like, who are you to do that, right? You are absolutely worthy and deserving of doing such things, but we've got to rewire that within ourselves and within our brains to allow that to happen. So it's possible you might be undervaluing yourself. You might be attracting clients who don't value your time, don't respect your boundaries, that kind of thing. And again, that can lead to resentment building up, not liking your clients, not enjoying the work, burnout, and really struggling to sustain your business long term. So if that kind of thing is showing up, then let's talk. All right. I'm very specialized in dealing with that stuff. And I can only know about this stuff. I can only deal with some of this stuff because I have been there. And one of the things I love is that often people that work with me will say things like, I have never told anybody this before, but I feel you might understand. And more often than not, I do. Or they're tell me something and they say, I've never told anyone this because I'm so ashamed of it. And they tell me and I'm like, oh, I was expecting something dreadful, but okay. And it's really not as bad, but it can be that thing that they have been holding down, suppressing, in denial of. It's really not that bad, right? So if that's the kind of thing that I love working with people on, because it's just that stuff has such a grip on us, it's just got such a hold over our lives, and it really shouldn't. So the other way this stuff shows up is number 5, overgiving. Womp, womp, womp. I remember once, oh my God, I mean, poor boundaries, right? It's with this overgiving part, right? So one time, I don't even know if I want to admit this, I think I spent 3.5 to 4 hours on a sales call with someone. She was so stuck in her stuff, in her story. We were going round in circles. Oh, it was just awful, 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 awful. And that is just not how I choose to live anymore. But you've got to have at least one of those in your toolbox, in your experience, to really truly understand how much you don't want to be doing that over and over. So, I mean, that is just utterly ridiculous. But anyway, so I was trying to help her more than she wanted or the help, and just overdoing it and overgiving. Anyway, too much. Again, that leads to more burnout. Wow, unsustainable. You just feel drained. It's horrible, right? You don't want to be resentful and doing that. So, yucks. Number 6, comparison. So we know it is the thief of joy. We know this. But social media is the worst, right? Social media makes you think that somebody else is better, more successful, more whatever, has it all figured out, has the silver bullet, yada, 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 right? Again, we all know this. You are seeing their highlight reel. The number of times that couples online have come out with their, course about, God, perfect relationships or whatever it is, and then they do a post about their amicable divorce 6 months later. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, really? Oh, so don't be comparing yourself to their what looks like perfect relationships and all that kind of stuff. It is just an absolute recipe for disaster. So yeah, you are uniquely awesome, and you do not need to be comparing yourself to other people. I mean, at the beginning, I thought you had to be skinny and blonde and American to be successful in the coaching industry. And I was like, well, I'm not in any of those boxes. So anyway, we can make up the most ridiculous things to count ourselves out before we even give ourselves a chance. Ultimately, as long as you are good at what you do, you help people, you care, you run things in an ethical manner, it doesn't matter what you look like. People ultimately do not care about that stuff. Feel good about yourself for sure, but don't let that stop you getting started. All right. So number 7, we're nearly there. Fear of vulnerability, right? It can be so awkward. If you had told me, I don't know, before I started my business, I would share vulnerable stories about myself online, I would have said you were absolutely off your head. There would be absolutely no way I would be doing that. So I think it's important. I like to share some of my disasters because hopefully it stops you doing the same thing or experiencing the same thing, or how I used to always tell stories about how I did deal with something that came up, right? Whether it was a client freaking out or whatever. I think it's important to share these things. And I love sharing through stories, and a lot in my group coaching or masterminds and things. And I've had clients come back to me and saying, oh my gosh, I ended up in that situation. I remembered the story and I did what I remembered the story. So I do like to share these things. And I've had people come to me and say, why are you sharing that? And I'm saying, well, I'm sharing it because if somebody else has this happen to them, if it's a situation with a client or somebody's trolls you online or whatever it is, to know that I've had that same thing and it's okay and I've carried on and this is how I dealt with it, for instance. So I think these are important. And I remember sharing online that I had a client freak out and what had happened, and I did a whole workshop on the drama triangle thing, which we'll do another episode on. And the number of people that went, oh my gosh, me too, me too, me too. All these big coaches really resonated with it. They'd spoken about it maybe in hush rooms quietly, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually say some of this stuff out loud, it like takes the shame away from it and really allows a better conversation to happen. Okay, 3 more. Number 8, projection and unresolved triggers. So I'm going to make this when you're working with clients. Sometimes if you haven't done enough work on yourself and you are triggered when holding space for a client, I really, really encourage you to get a coach and work on this stuff as the absolute next step you need to take. If you're working with other people, you do not want to be projecting your own stuff onto them or having it impact, say, an Akashic Records reading or something like that. It's just yucky and not cool. So I really do think that is, it's in your personal life or whatever, that's one thing. But when you're working with people and they're paying you, you really don't want to be showing up like that. It's not cool. So definitely make that an absolute priority. So it might bring up sort of feelings maybe of inadequacy or frustration or overreacting or like, I don't know. I've just seen some weird stuff happen online and I've been on the other end of it a few times and it's just not good. So yeah, the more that you can work on yourself, the more that you can heal your own stuff, the less you're going to have it come up within client relationships. You're going to attract a different type of client and that can only be good. So definitely look at that. And you also don't want to be teaching from a place of unresolved stuff. That can also be kind of yucky. So yeah, have a look at that. You might also avoid conflict. So you might avoid having, say, a difficult conversation with your client. You might not ask for feedback. You might have trouble enforcing like your payment terms, or you don't want to say something. And often in a coaching session even, or if it's in a group program or mastermind or whatever, asking that hard question that they might not like is sometimes exactly what they need. And if you are the type of person that avoids conflict in your personal life, you might not ask the right question in a coaching session. And ultimately, because of your fear or of avoidance of conflict, you might not actually be giving the best ultimate service to your clients. So if you might have the question come to you and then decide, no, I'm better not ask that. That's often the exact thing you should be asking. So just have an awareness of that. And yeah, it's just, people are more likely to try and take advantage in those situations if you're not being clear and holding space for having a conversation. And I think that's the most important way also to look at it, especially when you have a client coach, or a professional relationship with somebody, is that you can have a conversation about things. It doesn't have to be a confrontation, right? You can have a mature conversation about something. And if that is the case, that something has to be discussed, you should be off dealing with any trigger or projection that's coming up well in advance of the conversation you need to have with somebody, right? We're not shaming and blaming others, right? Easier said than done sometimes, but I think that is really, really important. All right. And the last one, we've kind of covered it. Number 10 is like this seeking validation from clients. I said it's kind of okay at the beginning of your, whatever you're doing, the new venture, whatever it is, because you do want to know if you're good or not. But again, we have to unwind that later on down the line. So very important. So if you are seeing any of these kind of things, and also I just will add one more on here. So, and I kind of covered it when I said, like, I didn't maybe want to claim being spiritual or whatever. That can often, we're in Halloween season, spooky season. It could be a witch wound that you might have. So it could be some sort of past life trauma of having been persecuted in the past for being, the witch thing we can go into another time, but it was, people were not out there with black pointy hats and cauldrons. It was midwives, it was naturopaths, it was herbalists, it was creatives. People like that were persecuted for their natural healing abilities, their intuition, that kind of thing. So if you have a part of you that is excited about that stuff, loves that stuff, is passionate about what you do, but you're not able to share it, that might be the source of some of where that is coming from. So again, just important to acknowledge and work through that stuff. Now, if you are feeling like you would like to work through some of this stuff, I have a lovely spooky little offer for you. So I came up with this. It's just a really easy way, an introduction to me, to working with me. If you haven't worked with me before, or if you have before, welcome back. That'd be lovely. It's a 3-session package. So 3 60-minute healing sessions with me. And we can get it done in the next few weeks in this potent energy window where we can, clear all this stuff. Obviously, you can do this work anytime, but let's use this energy to its best. And it's about the shadow work. It's about finding the root of where this stuff comes from, clearing it, and not having it rule our lives any longer. So if you are interested in that, I love to use the Akashic Records. They're a beautiful tool. I've got a whole episode on how they're so awesome. You can check that out if you're not sure what that is. But the beautiful thing I use the Akashic Records for is it gets me to the root of your issue as quickly as possible. So obviously I've worked with thousands of people, and I might think I know what the core of your problem is, but I like to use the Akashic Records to help us get a deeper or slightly different perspective on things that maybe I wouldn't have come up with. And using that, we can really work through this stuff faster, more effectively, and help you get to the other side. So I'd say the thing that people say most at the end of a session is they feel lighter, they feel calmer, they feel more clarity. And we want you to feel like that, and then take that into your life and into your business. And I think a nice little package of 3 sessions done over, sort of 1 a week, something like that, is the perfect amount of time for us to really, if there is something deeper going on, we've got enough space to work through something, and really get you accelerated, get you finishing the year strong, and feeling lighter, happier, and being able to bring in a much more full, whole, authentic version of yourself into your life and your business. So if you fancy that, I will put the details of that in the show notes. Check it out.